Mic check, testing 1, 2, 3, mic check. Mic check, testing 1, 2, 3, mic.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please find a seat? I'd like to open this special workshop and ask Mr. Marler if you would lead us in the pledge. If you'd all stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
According to the agenda, I'm finished. Mrs. Jen, would you take over the meeting?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. For anyone that I haven't met yet, hello. My name is Carice Lejeune. I'm the interim city manager. Very happy to be here. Tonight's workshop, you're going to notice that the format is a little bit different than a normal city council meeting. We have the agenda posted up there. The council will be working directly with the West Florida Regional Planning Council, who are here tonight to facilitate the meeting. We are going to allow a brief public comment section towards the end of the meeting, and it is for public comment only. We don't have enough time tonight to do questions and answers, but what we're asking is that there are blue cards in the back of the room. If you have a comment you'd like to make, please fill out one of the blue cards and give it to Ray. He will take them in the order which he receives them, and then we will invite people up to speak into the microphone as time allows. If you have a question, you can use the blue card as well, and just write your question on the back with your information on front and bring it to me, and I will make sure that staff responds to you in a very timely manner to answer your questions. The public comment will be 3 minutes instead of 5. And council, you don't have to push any buttons tonight. That system is been turned off, and you will be interacting directly with the Regional Planning Council people. So I would ask them to come up now, please, and start the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Lejeune. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Kathy Saldana, and I am a Public Involvement Coordinator with the West Florida Regional Planning Council. And we are here tonight as a neutral third party to just facilitate this special workshop for the City Council, working on the Comprehensive Plan 2020. You've probably heard it referred to as the Comp Plan, and that is most likely the vernacular that we'll be using tonight, but that's we're here to discuss that, and specifically 3 issues within that Comp Plan. But before I get into that, I want to do some brief instructions and introductions of how we have the night laid out for you. So our format and objective for the evening tonight will be, we will begin with a high-level overview of comprehensive planning in the state of Florida and specifically in the city of Destin. And then we'll focus on 3 specific topics of interest that generated tonight's meeting. Those topics are total floor area ratio, the multimodal district, and parking. After the presentations, we will enter into discussion with the City Council members. We have an hour slated for that discussion, and that will be to answer any existing questions Council may have or to clarify any details presented this evening. Excuse me. Once the City Council discussion is complete, we will take a 5-minute break at that point and try to get back within 5 minutes, and we will pick up at that point with public comments. As Ms. Lejeune said, we're going to follow fairly closely to regular City Council rules for that, in that you do need to fill out a card, you do need to turn it into the clerk, and you will be called forward. When you're called forward, please state your name and address and then give your public comment. Again, this is a comment-only forum tonight. There will be no questions asked, but Ms. Lejeune has made way for questions to be submitted. So we want to just remember to keep the comments to 3 minutes and keep them to a comment-only format. Especially throughout the evening, we want to recognize that only one person will have the floor at a time. So we want to make sure that throughout the evening, all of our comments are respectful in nature, that there be no argumentative, belittling, or harassing of comments. We also ask that we just do respect that one person has the floor. Everyone's comments are really important tonight, so we just need to make sure we keep that in mind so that all comments are properly heard and recorded tonight. When the public comment time is concluded, we will enter into a final City Council discussion, and that will be in the format of seeking answers from each council member individually regarding 3 specific questions that will be posed. When we have concluded this portion, this question and answer time, we should have a clear understanding of what actions will be taken in terms of direction for city staff on the 3 areas of the comp plan, or at very least determine what other information is needed to get to that point. So to recap, we will have some brief presentations, followed by the 3 focus point presentations. This will be followed by a 1-hour discussion with City Council on those 3 topics, quick 5-minute break, coming back into public comment, and then the question and answer. At that point, we hope to generate clear direction for city staff. There will be no votes taken tonight. This is not a city council meeting. This is a workshop, so we're looking for general consensus with the council tonight, not a vote. So with all that being said, I would like to introduce some of the individuals who are here to help us with this evening's objectives. First, I'd like to introduce the team that has come here from the West Florida Regional Planning Council. With us tonight, our Executive Director, Mr. Austin Mount, Community and Economic Development Planning Manager, Kate Daniel, Transportation Manager, Mary Beth Washnock, and Economic Development Planner, Caitlin Sarame. Representing the city of Destin tonight, our interim city manager, Carice Lejeune, city land use attorney, Scott Shirley, city attorney, Jerry Miller. Is he in the building yet? There he is. Okay, thank you, Jerry. City clerk, Ray Bailey, IT manager, Webb Warren, public information manager, Doug Rayner, interim community development director, Stephen Schmidt, planning manager, Ashley Grana, planner, Hank Woolard, and city transportation consultants from Renaissance Planning Group, principal Nick Lepp, and planner, Tim Whaler. And of course, members of the Destin City Council tonight, Mr. Mayor Scott Fisher, and councilmen in alphabetical order, Councilman Rodney Braden, Councilman Parker Destin, Councilman Tuffy Dixon, Councilman Jim Foreman, Councilman Siren Marler, Councilman Chatham Morgan, and Councilwoman Preble Ramswell. We're going to invite Caitlin Sarame up here momentarily. She is going to present the high-level overviews and then focus on those 3 topics that we talked about would be the focus for tonight. Mr. Mayor and City Council, you have been provided papers and pens where you're sitting. As Caitlin is presenting on these topics tonight, if you have questions, would you please just jot them down? We'll want to address those questions when we get into the City Council discussion portion that is to directly follow Caitlin's presentation. This will ensure that you have the understanding you need to participate in the question and answer portion following the public comments. And hopefully we'll be able to determine a clear direction for city staff at the end of tonight's workshop. So thank you everyone for having us. And at this point, I will hand it over to Caitlin.
Thank you, Kathy. I'd also note that you have the PowerPoint slides printed out, so you should have those before you. All right, so first I'm going to start off with the background of comprehensive planning in Florida. And so hopefully this will provide a foundation for everybody and some context as we move forward for our discussion later on tonight. In 1985, the Growth Management Act was passed, and so this was a pretty forward-thinking bill. It required that all plans be consistent at a local, state, and regional level. And so in 1992, Chapter 163 of Florida statute actually required all governments to have a comprehensive plan, and that's really what we're talking about today is the comprehensive plan. You had to have certain principles and guidelines and standards, and it really provided that framework and guideline of how you want your community to grow. And so the comprehensive plan is kind of broken up into elements, and I've provided some of the required elements here. I've emphasized the future land use element and also the transportation element because that's specifically what we're going to kind of be focusing on today. But all of these elements are really connected to each other. You can't really have one without the other. So for the capital improvement schedule of those projects, those are really coming from your level of service standards and your system needs, which are in your infrastructure element, your potable water, and your sewer, and then also in your transportation element, which is your roads and what kind of bike and pedestrian pathways you'd like to work on. So the future land use element specifically has your future land use designations, and these designations kind of describe what allowable uses can be in those designations. You have your agricultural, residential, commercial, mixed use, and they control your population densities, and they also control your building intensities. And when you're thinking about your future land use plan and any amendments you may have to it, you really have to rely on professionally accepted data. A lot of times that does come from BEBR, which is the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. And what that can provide for you and what you need to consider is also what is your anticipated growth going to be? Do you have undeveloped land? Is it going to be redevelopment? What are your population projections? And also, is this going to be discouraging urban sprawl, which is very important. Here's a map you all are probably pretty familiar with. It's the future land use map. Everyone's map, each local government's map, is very telling. It really kind of gives you an idea of what is on the ground, what's the built environment, and what is the direction that you all are trying to go. Some other areas you might see a lot more of larger tracts with agriculturally designated land. You might see some industrial parks. But for you all, you can obviously tell that there's an emphasis on mixed use. And mixed use obviously kind of promotes that live, work, play concept. Okay, so Chapter 163 also requires a transportation element. It was updated after the 2011 legislative amendments changes that you had to have a plan for multimodal transportation was the requirement. And so Article 2 of your comprehensive plan is where the transportation element is, and that's also where your multimodal transportation district is housed. And the focus on that is to have project and developments that support the district and ultimately reduce vehicle miles traveled. And that's not just the only thing that's in your transportation element. You have a lot of other stuff to meet the requirements of Chapter 163. You have to address traffic circulation, your level of service, and your system needs. Being that you are in a TPO, there's additional requirements. So you have to address aviation, your seaports, accessibility to them. And you also have to consider the appropriate densities and intensity to support transit. That is one of the highlights of being part of the MPO, or TPO as we call it here. Okay, so now I'm going to hone in a little bit and talk about some of the changes that have happened to your comprehensive plan here in Destin over time. Okay, so in the early 90s, that's when your 2000 comprehensive plan was approved, and at that time there was a compatibility review for proposed developments. So essentially with the compatibility review, you're supposed to be looking at the character of the surrounding area and what the proposed development that you want to put there, are they mutually beneficial, are there any potential negative impacts? That was changed up a little bit. In 2005, you had your 2010 comprehensive plan, and that created the tier system. And the tier system was to create certain incentives for intensities and intensities that may not typically be mandated. And it was supposed to encourage innovative development. And so the Tier 3 actually required negotiation with the city manager to determine a certain public benefit. It also did a couple of other things. You created a new mixed-use land use designation, town center mixed use. You also approved at that time the multimodal transportation district. And then there was height reduced by 25%, except in the Gulf Resort mixed use area. And then we have our 2020 comprehensive plan, which was improved in 2014, and that updated chapters 2 through 13, which was done in order to satisfy your evaluation and appraisal report, which is a Florida Department of Economic Opportunity requirement. And then, as you all know, most recently in 2016, you updated Chapter 1, your future land use element, and also Chapter 13, which is your glossary. And this removed the tier system from the comprehensive plan. All right, so here y'all are probably also familiar with your different planning areas. Each of these planning areas have their own character, they have their own assets, their own challenges, and that was brought up and discussed a lot at these Envision Destin workshops. Okay, so now I'm going to drill down a little bit more, and we're going to talk about some land use planning tools, and these are the topics that we are discussing, the three tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the intent and purpose behind these tools. Okay, first we have our total floor area ratio, and on your amended comprehensive plan in your glossary, the definition is the gross floor area of all buildings and structures on a development site divided by the gross land area of the site. And I provided a graphic here. Hopefully you can see it, but it shows three different floor area ratios, 0.5, 1, and 3. And so there is some flexibility of how you can achieve a floor area ratio. If we look at this 1 here, you could take up the entire site. You could take up half of it and have 2 stories. You could take up a fourth and have 4 stories. There's some flexibility in that, but also there's realistic restraints on that property. There may be some open space requirements. There may be stormwater, things like that. And the thought is that total FAR can be an effective way to ensure predictability and also control the bulk and mass of these buildings. And usually they're used in conjunction with other planning tools, building coverage, ISR, other things like that. Okay, so I'm just doing a little comparison here. I have an example of the South Harbor mixed-use land use designation, and then the tier system from the 2010 comprehensive plan. I just want to show you what the chart used to look like, and you have the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 essentially, those certain limitations on the height and the density and intensity, that was allowed by right. If you wanted to go a little bit higher, build a little more intensely, there was the opportunity to go to tier 2, but you had to provide certain supplemental design standards. And these design standards were supposed to encourage innovative development and enhance that non-motorized mobility in our area. And then finally, there was the tier 3, and that was the requirement with the negotiation to show the public benefit. I'd also note that short-term, long-term residential was calculated on density, and then non-residential was calculated on floor area ratio. Okay, and so now with the total floor area ratio in your 2020 comprehensive plan, all permitted uses that are articulated in that future land use element for the South Harbor mixed use are all subject to the total floor area ratio, which was the 3.0, and then you have the maximum height of 110, or 10 stories. There is a little asterisk of a bonus floor area ratio of 0.5 creating that high-quality pedestrian-oriented frontage on 98. And that was supposed to be articulated in the Land Development Code. So here's a graphic of the South Harbor mixed use tier 3 and the adopted 3 floor area ratio. This was taken from some of the presentations done previously. And so you can see here that this is, I believe it can go up to 160 feet prior to 15 floors, and then you have the 110 feet up to, I think, 10 floors. Yeah. And so here's just that difference in scale and bulk and volume of the developments. Okay, I'm going to move on to the multimodal transportation district. So I'm going through this, but as Kathy said, have your questions and we'll definitely address them at the very end of my presentation. So as I mentioned, in 2005, the Multimodal Transportation District was approved for the city of Destin, and it's an area where there's a major priority to have a safe and comfortable environment for all modes of transportation, biking, walking, transit, and cars too. We want it to be safe for everybody. And so here is the map of the different sub-areas. You have the Old Destin in red, and then you have the Crystal Beach Multimodal Transportation District in green. Okay. So a multimodal transportation district isn't just solely focused on transportation projects. It's a holistic approach. We're looking at the building orientation. We're looking at the maximum lengths. What is the relationship of the building to the road? At what point do we need to have a limit on block lengths so then there are pedestrian access and connectivity? Can we provide alternative parking options? There is the ability to reduce your parking up to a certain percentage with bicycle parking. There is the shared use parking where compatible uses can share certain parking spaces if you have different business hours. And do you have a functional pathways network? Do you have plans where you have connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists? And also, if you're going to be building and you have a bus stop maybe 1,000 feet away, are we planning to provide safe accessibility for people like a sidewalk to get to that transit stop? And overall, this impact is supposed to be that we're taking cars off of 98, that we're promoting economic development. The intent is if you have a safe, comfortable environment that you can walk around and you're in this human-scaled built environment, that you're going to be frequenting more stores. You're going to be going into that restaurant that's down the block because you feel comfortable and safe going there. And also, it creates a built environment for the people. Like I said, it's human scale. You feel comfortable, you feel safe. You're enjoying walking in the city of Destin, biking, and driving as well. Okay, so these last couple of slides, I just wanted to provide other examples of cities in Florida that are doing some similar stuff that the city of Destin is doing. I chose Temple Terrace because it's a little higher in population, but not by too much. It's right outside of Tampa, excuse me. And they are highly developed, so they're experiencing redevelopment things, just like the city of Destin is. And they have their own multimodal transportation district. And what they do is they have a mobility fee that applies to all new development, regardless of the transportation currency review. And they've done a lot of great projects that they've been funding through this mobility fee. What they do is they've been doing a lot of bus shelters here. You could see, and the real interesting thing about this is that it's right next to a park and ride lot. So it really solves those issues of last mile of people that maybe be getting off the transit stop, but then they have to walk a long distance to their car. So having that proactiveness to think about how are all these linkages going to work together. They've been putting in a lot of sharrows. And then this picture here is pretty cool because it's sort of the entrance into Temple Terrace, but it's also a bus shelter here. So they've been finding creative solutions to encourage multimodalism. And this one's a little closer to home, Tallahassee. They also have a multimodal transportation district. What they have is a separate multimodal transportation development code. And so you have to, if you're in this district, you have to refer to this code, and it controls the urban growth in the area, the urban design. They're really focused also on place-based development, making it human scale. And they have a significant benefit program. So developers that have to pay into the proportionate fair share fee, that money can go into one account, and then all that money accrues until they want to have enough money to pay for a major transportation project. And if you're in the transportation district here, 100% has to go to either bike, ped, or transit projects. And I have just a couple pictures of Gain Street because they've been doing a lot there. That's a big mixed use. It's a live, work, play situation, and they've been working on that street for a while, kind of doing a complete streets renovation. Okay, and finally I have West Palm Beach. I chose them because they are a waterfront community. They're a little bit more dense and larger than Destin, but they've been doing a lot. They were experiencing people moving away. They didn't have, they were losing some of their permanent population, but they've experienced a renaissance recently. They've embraced modality. They have this Flagler Drive right here that is, you know, it's made for the public realm. It goes on for a long period of time. It's adjacent to the waterfront, and it's made for the people. They have events all the time. People hang out there. They have picnics, all of that. They've invested in the bike share program. I've heard they just started doing a car share program. And then also, they have just approved a transit village, and it took a very long time, but it just recently got approved, and it's built right around a transportation hub so that people can easily get on the bus rapid transit or also take rail. I think all aboard Florida, the train's going to come up through this transportation hub. And this really came through a lot of public-private partnerships. So I think that's how a lot of these things got accomplished. So there's different ways to implement a multimodal community. Okay, finally we're going to get into talking about some parking. So in the Land Development Code, actually, not the comprehensive plan, it does talk about what the required parking spaces are based upon your use. So I've provided a little excerpt of the chart here. I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see, but I've given the example of a restaurant. And so the restaurant is one space per 100 square feet of gross floor area. Now there is minimum parking, which is 10% of that total parking spaces. And you'll also note that the minimum parking space requirement is the maximum allowed in the old Destin multimodal transportation district. Bicycle parking is required in both Old Destin and Crystal Beach. And there's also those strategies that I talked about with the joint use, shared parking. If you have compatible uses, you can get these joint use agreements pursuant to a city manager or his designee authorization. Getting back to that pedestrian-oriented development, parking lot locations are supposed to be in the back or the rear of the building. And this is to make sure that you have a human-scaled development where the building is right up to the right-of-way. Obviously, there are circumstances where you cannot put the parking in the side or rear of the building. So in that event, surface parking lots that are abutting the right-of-way, they have to be properly screened. We want the the side to be appealing to pedestrians and people in cars. So you have to provide either landscaping, 3-foot hedges, or a masonry wall, or a combination of both. Okay, I went through that pretty quickly, but I hope you guys had some questions, and this is the time that we're going to open it up for comment and questions. And whoever would like to begin, I will try to answer, but I also may use my city staff support as well. Thank you. Anyone's welcome to go first. Mr. Mayor? Okay.
That means cut the microphone on. Okay, I think you've done a good survey of the background and identified the critical areas that we've been concerned with, not only lately, but for years now. We went through the process of the original comp plan, which was very thin and imprecise to the point where we went into the 2010 and now the 2020 comp plans. What we've struggled with when they talk about the comp plan, there are a lot of elements in the comp plan besides just the land use, you know, but in some cases they're overlapping. I think one of the areas that concerns me most is transportation and parking. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because we have a major U.S. highway that goes right through the center of town, mm-hmm. which we do not control.
Right.
And therefore, if we're going to accommodate not only our permanent residents but the tourists that come through here, we've got to find a way of getting them from one point to another without using their cars in some cases. And then we've got to provide, which means providing public transportation, mm-hmm. which we're in the early stages of at this point. We're struggling with it. And then beyond that, we've got to find every available space in town for them to park if they use their car. So those two go together in my mind, and I think that's one of the areas that we have to address mm-hmm. Rather soon.
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the things I didn't mention, but with the transportation district, it's certainly a work in progress in building that critical mass and having the funding to provide money for transit. But it sounds like there's an ongoing struggle with providing these different modes of transportation when you have a major road that goes through that you have no control over, that you don't dictate. Okay. So, in these things, I'm not going to really provide recommendations. I'm just sort of trying to capture what you guys are feeling like, and from that, we're going to try to provide some direction to city staff. So just so you know, we're taking notes here, and we're going to really try to bring out the major themes and the major issues that you guys have, or some of the issues that you like and you want to keep. So, okay, anyone else?
Sure. So I'm a new council member. I actually ran basically on one of my major points was I was dissatisfied with the comp plan that was adopted. You gave a history of how we've reviewed development since the inception of the city, and you're right, we had a compatibility review from about 1985 till about 2000-ish. Mm-hmm. Everything would come to the council from a project review standpoint, and every so often the regime would change, we'd have different folks on the dais, and there was always a push to constantly move up the square footage that would trigger a review, and always push the lower square footage, the smaller buildings, over to just staff review. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know that was ever what the public wanted, but rather interests that wanted to maximize development mm-hmm. and get the political dais out of the process to prevent them from being told no. Come around 2005-ish, when we adopted the comprehensive plan in 2010, it appears that, in 2005, when we adopted the 2010 plan, we were being told by the state of Florida, no more DOs. You are short about 1,500 parking spots in your South Harbor district. And that was a scary thought for a lot of folks because there was a lot of financial interest that wanted to continue development. As far as I can tell, we've used multimodal as sort of a a well-meaning plan, but a subterfuge, in my opinion, to be able to get around the fact that we were over capacity then and we're woefully over capacity now. There are parts of the multimodal plan that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. We have maximum parking rather than minimum parking. We've got bike credits. Just because you put in bike racks doesn't mean people are going to magically want to start using them. I've found that that is just it's nice on paper, but in reality it doesn't apply. We have outdoor seating credits that make no sense. At the end of the day, I don't hate the multimodal plan, but there are parts that really need to be tossed because they make no sense and do not promote actually more people to come and visit the harbor in a non-auto way. And I think we almost are remiss by thinking that if magically we put in some of these amenities, that we're going to get folks, vacationers from the south that are not from our community, to magically give up their vehicles. I think that's an illusion to some extent. So we need to prepare for that and understand that and not rely that on somehow we're magically going to get these folks separated from their vehicles. And from there, my biggest problem is we've completely taken away the council. What you left out of the history of the 2010 comprehensive plan was that, yes, Tier 3 would require analysis from us from a public benefit standpoint, but Tier 1 and Tier 2 did not, which was a drastic change from what we had before. Ultimately, one of the biggest complaints mostly that I get is about the Emerald Grand. The Emerald Grand was a Tier 2. Aesthetically, it's a Tier 3 because it's Tier 2 buildings stacked on top of a parking garage. People don't like that. We've got problems with parking that come from it. And when the public comes up in arms and comes screaming at the dais, we have to tell them, no, that was staff. No, that was staff. We also had a lot of power that we gave to the general manager, or our city manager or his designee, and we ended up with extra floors. You know, there are problems with that system where you do not have review by the public. The final push has been now in 2020 that we've completely taken ourselves out of the project review business. And in my opinion, that was a very foolish thing. We never should have done that. And I know that's not on your three-prong tonight, but the reinsertion of the council is my foremost interest in coming at this 2020 plan. I'll open up the floor to anybody else. So I think I probably said enough for now. She's furiously filling things out, so I'll yield to anybody else who wants to speak.
Could I just add to that?
Certainly.
I agree with everything Mr. Parker said, Mr. Destin said, excuse me. And in fact, I wouldn't take exception with a single word, but I would also add to that, and he may have meant to have that as part of it. We've also removed council completely from the impact fees. And if those are waived, modified, traded for something, I would also suggest that council should at least have the right to advise and consent, if not be involved in any waivers or reduction of impact fees. To me, the impact fees are what's going to pay for this, and we're never going to get the traffic and things off the road unless we forcefully administer those and maybe even increase those.
Okay, it was a tad difficult to hear you. So you were saying with the impact fees that you want to use them as a strategy. I don't know the total background. Are you trying to use that as an incentive as opposed to other things?
Not really. What I'm really pushing for is I believe the city council should have some input and control over the process, particularly of larger structures. Mm-hmm. And whenever we waive a rule or allow something to be done that is in a large project and that might be on the gray area close, it should be brought to council. Council, what I'm really saying is the same thing he did. Council
Sure.
needs more input in this process.
Yeah, I got two major things from you. The one is that we need to go back and look at ways for the council to be more involved and to take final action on certain projects because you want to be part of the process. And so that is I like this. This is a very succinct thing that we can put on this board as something to look into, ways to explore that. The second thing is that it reminds me that with the Temple Terrace example that I gave, they have minimum and maximum parking, but what they do is that they don't want to limit it such that it degrades the vitality of the area. So they have a set schedule that they assess and look at whether the parking conditions are appropriate. Things change all the time. And so you brought up 3 specific things with the minimum and maximum, the biking, and there was one more that are specific things that then city staff can go look at if that's not the way that we want to go with implementing our multimodal transportation district.
I have a very specific concern with language in our new comp plan. In policy 1-2.1-7, density intensity of development, it is going to be, give me a moment. I'm actually using, the one from Monday is nice, but it doesn't tell you what was changed from 2010 to today. I have a red line version, which shows what was inserted. I needed to have that just so I could see what we've changed without having to compare both and back and forth. And some of the things that were changed are quite alarming and doesn't seem to really promote any of the things that we want from a multimodal standpoint or a fixing any of our problems standpoint. Yeah, policy 1-2.1-7. The new language says the primary means of controlling quantity of development in mixed-use areas shall be maximum total floor area ratio. Fine, if that's what we want to do, great. But here's where I have got a serious concern, where it says where living accommodations are part of mixed-use or high-intensity residential development. Some of the biggest and baddest buildings we have and the ones that we've complained about the most so far, the number of units shall be constrained by maximum total floor area ratio rather than maximum density as described in the flume section. That's alarming. So what I've seen here is also where a zone permits both density and intensity, which is our South Harbor District, our most problematic area, that density and intensity, and it was changed from may to shall not be applied to the same acreage. My concern is, of course, if you break your development out in phases, you could get your calculation done as if you're not currently on a parcel that's already been developed.
Okay.
Now, and it keeps going, a developer may separate a portion of their property to calculate as density, generally for single-family development, and different portions of the property to be calculated as intensity. All I see that is just a giant ambiguity for abuse. And all things being considered, I'd like to see it struck. I can't imagine how density and intensity would no longer be an important thing to analyze. From what I can tell from this entire thing is we've removed the council from the process. Yeah, we got rid of Tier 3, but we've handed everything over to the staff, which has not been shown to handle very well for the citizens of Destin. And at the end of the day, we've come down in height, but we went up. In some of our spots, it appears almost by treble, by 3 times in some of the density calculations. And what we've done is, yeah, we'll come down in height, but we haven't solved the parking garage stacking issue. But and we've lowered heights, but we've maxed out density in certain areas. So it's sort of, again, a subterfuge. I feel like we're going to just be cramming more folks, while aesthetically it may not be as bad, which I'm not sure if we've actually fixed that with the parking garage issue, but we're going to have the same net effect from cars on the road, or worse. So what we've done is we patted everybody on the heads and said, no, we're coming down in height. Yeah, the staff will take care of it. But let me tell you, the folks that still want to develop are still going to hit a lick, and it's going to come at the cost of the folks who live here from an infrastructure standpoint. And we haven't done anything about that. And I apologize for dumping on you, and you're the moderator, and so I'll extend my apologies. But we've got some issues, and I want staff to look at that.
That's what we want to hear. We want to hear, what the issues are. So the combining the intensity and density does not seem like an appropriate way. And some of those different ways, because that's what the total floor area is doing. It's combining, so then you're not really counting the units per acre. as it used to be. And so you're saying that that can significantly impact your infrastructure because we're not accounting for that.
We're not accounting for that, and each one of those units comes probably with at least 2 cars. And it's going to come with a severe amount of impact, and everybody's going to want to turn right. You know, right now, it took me 45 minutes to get here from Fort Walton, and all the traffic coming east, I made it halfway across the island, came to a complete dead stop. You know what, and we know what development it took me to get past to finally get into the clear. The same thing happened if you're headed west. I mean, it's something we have to address, and as I see the current comp plan right now, we don't have any way of really preventing future issues like that from an intensity and density standpoint.
Okay, and that was specifically, make sure we have that policy. Do we have that down?
Yeah, I can give it to you again if you want.
Okay, 1.2.1.7. All right,
Yeah.
great. Does anybody else have an opinion, support, agree? We're trying to build some consensus here.
I'd like to comment just a little bit here, and you know, Parker, I'm sorry, Mr. Destin, I apologize. I hate to think that you know, that you would think that we were foolish for doing something that we were basically you know, trying to do in in a good way. We weren't trying to increase you know, the potential for development or anything like that. You know, my whole thing was basically eliminating Tier 3, and you know, I hated the fact that we could have 170-story buildings being built, and so that was the one good thing I did see out of this comp plan review. And another thing too is that and I'm just going to throw this out there, you can only reduce somebody's ability to develop their property to a certain amount before we start ending up in lawsuits. So, you know, I don't know where we strike the balance of what is fair, and I'm all about trying to, and I'm not trying to say that I'm absolutely for development, because I got to tell you, I'm for fair and responsible development, but I just don't want to get into a situation where we're basically taking 50% of the value of somebody's piece of property from them and what they're able to do. And another thing too is I don't have a bit of problem in the world about the reviews if we want to change to what actually comes to us to be voted on, you know, as a city council, but you know, we need to have criteria that we're going to be looking at, and you know, is it compatibility? Is it, so in other words, if they've met all the terms that it takes to comply with you know, a Tier 2 development, then we got to have some criteria that we're going to review to approve or deny that project. So, you know, I mean, so
No,
I
I don't
hope
disagree.
you understand what I'm saying.
No, I don't disagree. What I think you're saying is, listen, I have no intention of putting anything in place that would deprive somebody 50% of the value of their potential development rights. What I think we need is perhaps some sort of I'm tired of getting tons of phone calls when a Tier 2 project gets when a Tier 2 project gets approved, and people call me going crazy saying a 300-unit development that is being developed by the Chinese investors behind Chick-fil-A just got approved. When did you guys approve that? I said never. Didn't come to council. That's a problem. Our standards need to be that a certain amount of minor stuff, I'd call it minor and major, and where that line is drawn, of course, is going to be a bit ambiguous, and it's going to be a debatable threshold, and it could be a moving target. But let staff do the small stuff.
I don't have a bit of problem in the world with it coming to us, but I just want to make sure that we are having some sort of objective criteria that we're going to look at to be able to make a determination as to whether or not, because if it's just a pass-through thing, we haven't done anything. You know, so you know, if
parking is one of those objective indicators that we really need to get a handle on.
And
that's
I
one of
agree with
those-
you 100%.
And that's one of those things I'd tell the staff, if we can weave that in, that's going to be a major one if we're going to be doing any
if they've
review.
met the parking requirement that's in place, what are we going to say then? And I agree with you, man. There is problems. There are
No,
problems.
and I believe, listen, nobody wants to end up, I feel for folks that want to be able to develop their property. I don't want to make it to where it's uncertain that nobody's going to park a bunch of money in the South District wondering whether or not they'll get the approval, the yea or nay, depending on the whim and caprice of the council. There needs to be as many objective criteria, like you said, as possible.
I just think that we would have to work on that and make sure that we
Oh,
get
yeah.
that. And I kind of thought that we would do that when we started developing the land development code. Those things would be in place then, and hopefully we would work on some of those issues. But, you know.
But here's the thing, your comp plan can't conflict with your land development code. It trumps. So if you don't have the right to review, you can't just grant it to yourself through the land development code.
I'm not talking about that. I'm
Oh, I
talking about
understand.
some of the finer details.
Oh, yeah,
not-
finer
not-
details will
yeah,
be in the
yeah,
land development
yeah.
code. This is
Understand.
general, but I just, we got to get our parking straightened and all the other.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we need some criteria that these straightforward objectives that when it comes before you that you can review, and a lot of times when it does come before council, it needs to definitely comply with certain criteria, and then there's always the general that it meets the intent and harmony of the land development code and that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So
Compatibility.
right. So there's certain ways that we can achieve that and have staff look into ways to incorporate that. And so I also heard that the intent in improving this comprehensive plan is that we did want to reduce some of the height and some of the intensity issues, but at the same time you have to balance some of those legal maybe ramifications and some issues that may come with reducing people's entitlements or rights, so to speak. Okay.
That's my feeling, that we can only take so much value away.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We have built in, at least in some areas, a method to at least begin a pattern. If you look at the HDR designation, it has a maximum density of 19.9 per acre within that designated zone. Most of our graphs have a space for that. There's just a not NA put into it. I don't know what the complexity of modifying it, but if we could simply come up with a number either for each area or for the city overall, it won't exceed 19 per acre unless council approves or something of that nature, we might be able to fairly easily address
So
this
a
problem.
threshold, perhaps.
Threshold, basic minimum number of units per acre.
Okay.
Or
So
maximum, excuse me, misstated, maximum number of units per acre.
having a maximum number, and if you want to exceed that, that would be a threshold to then come before you all potentially. Okay.
Even a square footage, a certain square footage, I wouldn't mind looking at, as far as, there's a lot of places that aren't hotels or condos or whatever it may be, but a maximum square footage that would come to us, anything over that, to be
Okay.
able to look at that, to make sure that we're getting everything we need to get. So, doesn't matter how many units there are, but if it's going to be a certain square footage, we probably ought to take a look at it too, so.
Okay, so a square footage for both residential and non-residential projects?
I don't know about residential, but non-residential.
Non-residential, okay.
I believe we already have something like that. It's anything over 10,000 square feet has to go back in front of council.
Not if this, not with this one, it wouldn't, yeah.
Well,
There's
not now.
nothing that,
Not now, but in the past, I can't find it, a hard copy now, but we've got
I
it. It
think
was in
if-
the past, and anything over 10,000 square feet had to go back for the council, but with the Emerald Grand, with the 80,000 or excess of 80,000 square foot minor change, was done with one signature, never went back to the council. So my problem is, doesn't matter if we got a square footage, if it goes over amending 5,000 square feet or 500, or 1% of what the development order is, once the staff signs off on it, it's signed off. There's no going back.
yeah, I'm just
I mean,
saying
that's,
that
and
before
we
this,
had something like that in place before, and it did no good.
yeah. But I'm saying with the new plan, I didn't see 10,000 in there being anything. Yeah, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so what you're getting at, there are, techniques if you have an approved development order, and then they want to go back and adjust that depending on the intensity of how they want to do it. It can be a small adjustment. Sometimes that's a staff review. Sometimes, depending on how much they want to change, it does have to come back before you all. So that could be something too, after something's already approved and then they want to go back and change it. At what point do you all get back involved? Something to consider.
I don't know if I spoke about it before, but parking concurrency in the South Harbor District, we've got a current model that basically the idea is that everybody's going to park on the north and then just cross 98 somehow by magic without getting splattered, and they're going to come visit the South Harbor District. I think we need to start thinking really long and hard about parking concurrency for the South Harbor District, and we need to build our parking garages that we have never built, because there is a legitimate demand. And to that extent, we could explore some options that, if where's the money going to come from? But if there are public-private partnerships where if there is somebody who wants to develop in the South Harbor, that give them an opportunity to perhaps 10% of their on-site parking can be allocated at X amount per space in our parking garage, and up to however big we build it. And then once that's maxed out, well, then that's maxed out. You can't just keep purchasing spots that don't exist in these parking garages. It's a way to finance it.
I'm going to throw my thoughts into this. Mr. Foreman and I are the most senior council members up here, having served back before we had a tiering system and everything. One of the things that we had was quasi-judicial hearings with our, I can't even remember, we still call it the LPA back then. The developments would come before them, our committee that we the council appoints, and we'd have quasi-judicial hearings, could go for weeks, days, months. Then they come to us, and we do the same thing over again with the quasi-judicial. To correct one thing that Mr. Destin said, the Emerald Grand was before the tiering system was even started. That is the catalyst that actually brought the tiering system to fruition at that time, and that council should come and take care of anything that was in the Tier 3 category. And the problem that existed with that in the tiering system, before I got off the council the first time in 2008, we had 3 projects that were before us for the tiering system. Of those 3 projects, one was a sister to the Emerald Grand. The second and third were in different areas of town. Of those, two of the one, I think one in Crystal Beach and one in town, were approved by the council. However, due to the economic crash of that time, they never got off the ground, and so they ended up losing the DO before it was all over with. And the current situation with the what people are calling the baby grand was dropped down after he lost the battle for having a Tier 3. It automatically dropped to Tier 2, which is what he's going on with the former comp plan. The second part of that is that a lot of the things that we did, I mean, I have no idea, up here, the problem with the tiering system to me had to do with public benefit. And you had 7 council members and the mayor who had their idea of what public benefit was. You had the public's idea of what a public benefit was, the developer's idea of what the public benefit was, which was one of the reasons that the city manager, whoever that was at the time, we had several during my first tenure here, at that time, had sit down and negotiated, and also the LPA had negotiated various things. Okay, well, you can do this if you want to give us like in the Crystal Beach area where we needed beach crosswalks. We needed a beach crosswalk. You're going to give us this as part of your public benefits so that the public can traverse down to the beach from, off the north old 98. So we had problems there. And the only thing I see with the council, if we want to go and have the council review practically everything, we're all volunteers up here. We're all voted in. We don't get paid. And, that's going to also require, that's why we have qualified staff members to try to do the job. Now, the twice that's been voted down that the council gets paid. Now, if the citizens don't mind us sitting up here every day, I mean, you're looking at could be 2 or 3 times a week. We might have to come and review something or set special meetings. And all of us are employed here, and we also have varied fields of knowledge. Some of us are lawyers and businessmen, maintenance people, things like that. So you have everybody, again, back to the criteria of, who knows what's right and who knows what's wrong. Then you go back to the public benefit thing. We have our ideas, the public has their ideas, the developer has a different idea, because the developer, as Mr. Dixon said, you want to give them, everything you can, because it's their right to have certain things on their property, but at the same time, what does the public get out of it? So the tiering system wasn't perfect. We figured that out, and I mean, even right now, the way we're going, everything is now being reverted back to what we used to call Tier 2, but now we're looking at, we have to review those also. You're going to be seeing a lot of, what happens if we say no. Then, as Mr. Dixon said, we're going to be in court over a lot of things because we are a property rights state. When we do that, it's the citizens who are actually, hurting, because that's where your tax dollars is going to be going, paying attorneys and paying all kinds of things. I realize that there has got to be a solution, but it's got to be a solution that's not going to take away the funds of the city, because each developer is going to come and say, well, we didn't get what we wanted, so we're going to sue you, and see what the courts say. And if the courts say yes, then we're stuck. Previous to when I got on council in 1999, I believe there was a situation of a unit that the council turned down. They went to court and they won, and they built exactly what they had originally asked to build, that the previous council had turned down. The whole point of the other thing that bothers me is we're talking about a comprehensive plan that we just now passed. It's going to have to change in 4 more years. We're talking, when the 2010 plan was passed, it was in 2005. We're passing the 2020 plan in 2016. Then we got to look toward the 2015, or whatever it's going to be, 2025 or 2030 plan next. I mean, we don't have a lot of time. By the time we do it, we're back to square one all over again. So there's got to be an easier way to do it, and do it where it is. I have confidence in most of the city staff. I mean, there has been some problems, but if you actually go back and look, these are the people who were trained to do that. We're not trained to do all that stuff. And I mean, I understand where a lot of people are coming from. I'm going to admit that I work for an entity that's at the Emerald Grant, or I work for the company that owns part of the Emerald Grant. But I'm not here representing them. I'm here representing the citizens, because I never was happy with it when it was first built, and I earn a paycheck. That's what I'm after. I'm not out to help them or hurt them, but at the same time, if another developer tried to do the same thing, are we going to be the same way with that developer? If we're going to do it, we should treat everybody the same. I thought when we did the 2020 plan, by having everybody all across the board, the height and everything for all places would be the fair way. Apparently, some people are thinking that's still not fair, because there's certain areas they want lower heights than what we've done across the board. And I have no problem with the height as far as lowering the height, because I never was happy with all the things that we've done. One of the reasons this city became incorporated was another building called the Destin Yacht Club. That was probably the straw that broke the camel's back when the city was incorporated, because the county allowed that to be built in what we considered Old Destin. And then now, of course, because of the laws, we're allowed to build Emerald Grands and all these other condominiums that are coming in place. So how do we appease the citizens? How do we appease the developer? And how do we, as the council, be fair and just to everyone with the comprehensive plan as it stands now, or the new comprehensive plan as we come forward? That's the biggest issue. And parking, yes. Parking is an issue because we promised, the council at that time promised, when we went to that system, the tiering system, and also when we changed and did the CRA for the Harbor District, we promised the developers that we'd have parking garages. We've got a parking lot that we finally got paved. Right. We've got one other area that we could build a parking garage. We're also limited on the height on the parking garages too, because of what we've decided the height should be on the north part of the Harbor District. And so where do we go from there? Mr. Destin brought up the idea of a public-private partnership. I've been trying to do that for a long time. It's just you got to find somebody that's willing to build it manage it, get their money back, say 10 million, if it takes 30 years to get their 10, 20, 30 million back, and then it reverts to the city and we can continue to get funds. But the parking issue is not going to solve itself by just saying the developer can't build or has to have a certain amount of parking. We as the council and we as the city also have to come back and do the things we promised, which was build those parking garages.
Okay.
I got one clarifying point, if I could, please.
Sure.
Mr. Marler, what he said just a little bit ago, he said that I had said to give them whatever they want. I never said that. Sorry about that. I never said that. Let's clarify that, please. Sorry.
Okay. Sure, we,
With the microphone on.
yes.
This is the future land use element that we're talking about here, establishing the rules for the road on that. Destin is 95% built out. It's confined on 3 sides by water and the other side by the county, and that's not going to change. So we're stuck with what we've got within the perimeter of our city limits. Most of the property being already in place, the direction we're going in is redevelopment.
Right.
Where you assemble property in order to build whatever it is you're going to build. In most cases, if it's a larger building, you have to assemble multiple parcels to do that. So the thing that I'm looking at here is that we're probably bypassing a problem in our plan that has to do with redevelopment. I don't know that, but I'm saying it seems to me to be the focus should be on how to deal with that kind of situation, where you could establish the rules.
Okay, so where are the opportunities in redevelopment that we can try to implement some of these things that we're having issues with the parking and, okay. Anyone we haven't heard from yet?
Yeah,
Council?
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Destin's saying. So I think him and I have a consensus there.
Okay.
Something I kind of hold close to me is parking. I'm a business owner. We have a business on the harbor and on Holiday Isle. And first of all, I think one of my biggest frustrations right now is this conversation is better suited for 20 years ago, because like what Mr. Foreman said, we are 95% built out. And with redevelopment being the key moving forward, I think one of the ways to achieve the idea of perhaps a lower density in Destin is to tighten up our parking regulations. And in a lot of ways, our parking requirements defy logic. I have a restaurant on Holiday Isle, and I wanted to open another business next to it. They don't operate at the same hours. I have 90 spots. I had to pay $14,000. That was the lowest bid to redo my parking lot. The parking lot doesn't make sense. It's a terrible layout. It was expensive, and I don't mind coming into compliance with the code, with the parking code. My problem is we have Harry T's was permitted, a restaurant on the harbor was permitted with 18 spots. We have Margaritaville was permitted with just about the same. They had more employees working there last night than they had permitted parking spots. Mm-hmm. I had 20 employees, and they do last night working for me, and they do 4, 5, 10 times the volume we do. We're a small restaurant. So, and that's an outdoor dining kind of loophole that we provide, but it defies common sense. Why are you going to permit a restaurant that doesn't have enough parking for their employees? Mm-hmm. So where are they going to park is the question. And we had a gentleman the other night mention that at Emerald Grand, which is kind of the epicenter of a lot of our parking problems in this town, in that harbor district, he mentioned that they had a parking attendant who turned around people from the Emerald Grand from parking there. And it wasn't tourists, and it wasn't locals or visitors, it was employees. And so that begs the question, well, where are they parking? Mm-hmm. At Harbor Docks, we pay somebody $13 an hour to sit in our parking lot and turn away people going on pontoon boats next to us all day long from our parking lot. Somebody that's not going to spend $1 with us. Those parking regulations with the pontoon boats also aren't great. And so they're turning away employees at the Emerald Green. So it begs the question, where are they parking? Either one, they're parking in someone else's business, or two, they're parking in a city parking lot without compensation. Now, and I agree with the parking garages. We do owe the property owners on the harbor from the easements. We have an obligation to build parking garages. But the problem with that, until we fix our codes, one of the reasons we need these parking garages is because we have harebrained parking codes in the first place. And we've created this parking nightmare by just bad parking regulations. So until we fix the parking regulations, the root of the problem, I won't support spending another dollar for city parking if we don't address what's necessitating the need for the parking in the first place.
Okay, so looking at other ways that we're going to be calculating, because you brought up employees, and if they can't even park their employees, looking at ways that, maybe it's based on, there's other ways besides square footage.
All of my employees and most responsible business owners, our employees park on our property. Mm-hmm. And, when we had Harbor Docks in the 90s, what we did well in the business. And we took the money and we reinvested it in the north side of the highway. Mm-hmm. And we bought more parking for us. Now, we're not asking the city to provide us with parking because we have enough. We did it responsibly. But when you permit a really, really big restaurant with 18 parking spots, mm-hmm. you're going to have problems. And you're going to have a parking deficiency. Where are those people going to park? In our city parking lots that we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars on because of problems we created for ourselves in the first place, it baffles the mind.
Okay, yeah, so we have the issue with where we're redeveloping a lot of piece of property, so we're restricted as it is, but then also reconsidering the way that we're calculating parking to keep these businesses viable.
But again, 20 years ago, this would have been a better discussion. There are very few people, barring a redevelopment of a property, we're affecting maybe one or two property owners, mm-hmm. but that's not fair to those property owners either.
Yeah, I'm getting that fairness theme as well. Okay.
So, I mean, and I can think of one or two property owners that are yet to develop on their property, and it's not fair to them. So I think the source of my frustration is you have that fine line between you've allowed 95% of Destin to do it, and you have that 5% that haven't. Mm-hmm. It's frustrating and muddy.
Sure. Okay. Councilwoman Preble-Risch?
I've made notes and I've got all sorts of stuff written out, and I don't want to be boring and read through a list, but I think this is sort of the prime opportunity to do so. I will concur with almost everything I've already heard, starting off with the issue of council review being removed from the comp plan. I have a huge problem with that. I've spoke to that several times during the process. I went through the most recent version, and I'm a note taker and I highlight everything, but each of these orange things I have here are where council was taken out and someone on staff was placed in. And with all that we have in terms of development and issues and community coming forth with concerns, it's even more vital for us to have a word and, at least in some form or fashion, be it determined by square footage, be it determined by, whatever, variance, something. But in my opinion, we must have the council involved in the process. One of the things that concern me is if you look at policy 1-3, 6.4, which on our thing is page 43, there's a section here and it's talking about identification of land use and zoning inconsistencies. Under number 1, undeveloped lands, it actually states that property shall be administratively rezoned. And I have a problem with that as well. I mean, we need to be aware of what's going on and why, and know the history and the facts surrounding it. And in fact, I think this is one area which we've had significant discussion on, a particular piece of land that we can't figure out quite when and where it was rezoned from conservation.
So if there's nonconformity and they want to be rezoning it to make it conforming, but at least it comes before the council for approval?
Well, certainly, if we're rezoning anything, I think council most certainly needs to be aware of it and have the ability to discuss it and learn the reasons and rationale why.
Sure. Okay.
I have multiple instances of where it was removed, but you don't need that. I mean, we've been, talking about just the fact that the council's been removed, and I think that's enough. I don't need to go through section by section. One thing that bothers me as well is the language, and I've identified just a multitude of loopholes, of word changes that seem nitpicky to pick out, but with a legal document, as Councilman Destin pointed out, may and shall have quite a difference, as does could and would and should. There are several instances where we note other permitted uses, certain size thresholds, limited uses, but then nowhere was it spelled out what those thresholds were, what those limited uses were. So it leaves it open to interpretation, loopholes. Similarly, we talk about certain developments may be exempt, parking structures where feasible, parking lots when feasible. Well, it's very subjective. Whose idea of feasibility is it? Where the option to combine projects if they fall below a certain threshold. Well, what's the threshold? Nowhere did it stipulate that. And who decides it?
So having more objective terms that are clearly defined?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have to. It's a legal document.
Okay.
Similarly, section 1-1.21 is up here. As I dig through and find the actual page. 1-2.1. Funny, my wonderful notes, and now I can't find my own notes. 1-1.21. That's why I went too far. Okay, that is on page 5, the bottom of page 5, going into page 6. This is talking about protecting residential areas. My concern here is that in previous versions of the comp plan, we were protecting all residential areas. We didn't designate certain areas, certain locations. It was essentially the residential areas of Destin. However, in this version, it specifically states within the village planning area, which is great for them, but these same issues affect many other neighborhoods, specifically Crystal Beach and Holiday Isle. So
Maybe this in that one section, though.
well, it's residential quality, protecting residential areas. So I think this is an instance where we've really allowed instances of protecting tourists, of protecting builders, protecting developers, and kind of overlooked our residents. And it leads to many other issues, including occupancy, which I'll get to in a minute. But that's something that really stood out to me, specifically after a discussion we had at our council meeting on Monday, having to do with short-term rentals and nuisances and things of that nature, which this section clearly is directed to preventing.
Okay.
Another problem with this plan is, and this has also been discussed in brief, is the increase in intensity, I should say. And there are 4 areas in particular in which greater than Tier 3 levels are now in place. And all of our public meetings, if it wasn't unanimous, it was certainly an overwhelming majority of folks saying no more intensity, less density, less height. I mean, over and over and over. It was banged into our heads. We got emails, phone calls, at least I did, and I know from, being up here on council, others spoke to having the same feedback. And in fact, the different public meetings that were held, they had boards up, just like this, took notes. It's written clearly on those boards. And yet here we are with significantly increased intensity and density in some areas. I hear a lot, well, we just can't draw people here if we're not allowed the height, or we don't have this intensity and density. Well, I think looking at South Walton proves that point. Anything south of 98 can't be greater than 50 feet. They've done pretty darn well. I don't think anyone can argue that point.
There's a lot bigger buildings there, they just changed it.
Certainly, but they're not getting that same height. So, I think that's an important thing to look at. Even the state weighed in at one point and was giving pushback on intensity and density levels and the need for us to reduce. But it's added in. All right, so moving on. Another thing I've been made aware of by several different folks, be it normal citizens, be it developers, be it just somebody wanting to redevelop their own home, is that there's a practice of people having two sets of plans. The one they present to the city and they get approved, and then the real one. And then the real one comes forth in several different phases, be it in variances or amendments. And it's a way to sort of bypass and circumvent the system. And I don't know how or if there's any way to, there's got to be a way to address it somehow, but it's concerning.
Perhaps that goes back to what you were saying a little bit in some capacity about something gets approved, but then they come back afterwards and try to modify that site plan, and you all don't see it, don't know about it. So making sure that that's captured and that it's reviewed, and potentially if the movement is to move towards having things reviewed by you all based on a specific criteria, that maybe could help alleviate some of that.
Sure. Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's something that, we have to get a hold of. Because ultimately, we're the ones that are answerable to the public. Why is this happening? How is this allowed? What are you doing? Well, we don't have the power or authority to do anything right now. And that's, we need to be able to have answers and be able to do something. That's why we were elected, was to be up here to help represent the public and their wishes. And we can't do that if we're not empowered to do so. Okay. I alluded to this earlier, and it was the occupancy issues surrounding short-term rentals. We talked briefly about it on Monday. Well, I shouldn't say briefly. It was a little bit longer than briefly, but we've certainly talked about it in the past. And we have issues with short-term rentals in terms of massive occupancy, which is, you get into the chicken and the egg argument. We now have trash issues. We have noise issues. We have, parking issues, probably at the forefront of all that. And it all comes back to, short-term rentals and how are we addressing that, and can we address that? And, I've looked through all of our stuff over and over and over again. I've talked with lots of folks, and, it turns out it seems there may actually be a remedy within our own comp plan. As we look into the definitions and in the LDC as well, it describes single-family residences as a maximum of 5 people not related by blood, or 1 or more if you're blood or marriage related. And I find that very interesting because it appears that might actually be a solution to our problem right before us. And of course, that's going to need some more looking into, but the question then becomes, and this came out on Monday as well in terms of parking, things that we have addressed within our comp plan and within the LDC that are on the books are sometimes not being enforced. And sometimes it's said because it doesn't have the teeth, And sometimes I'm told it's because we need an accompanying ordinance. And so my question, I guess this is sort of a two-pronged thing, because if it's in our comp plan or in our LDC, do we need an ordinance if we stipulate this is this? Or do we need an ordinance as well?
Might defer that question.
The comprehensive plan is an ordinance, and the land development code as well is an ordinance. But there are certain circumstances where in particular, the comprehensive plan is not what we call self-implementing, but would call for something to be accomplished through the land development code. And in those circumstances, that would require, before implementation, full implementation, a corresponding land development code provision to implement the comprehensive plan provision. So it's on an issue by issue, provision by provision basis that you'd have to make that determination.
Okay, great, because like I said, I mean, especially with this short-term rental issue that we have, and, you know, homes of 9 bedrooms sleeping 36, and then yet the home is only supposed to have 4 parking spaces. I mean, there you go, one problem after another, just lining up, and they have to be, we just absolutely have to do something about them in some form or fashion. So if that's something we need to address further in our comp plan and LDC, we need to do it. And if it's an ordinance that needs to come forth from such changes or enactions within these documents, then so be that. But that's sort of the gist of that whole topic.
Okay. So one of the things, we have our 3 kind of major topics that we're discussing today, but certainly this short-term issue with the occupancy and people exceeding that, and they're just staying and having large group of people staying there, it definitely sounds like it's an issue. We've heard stories already about it, that it's an ongoing issue, and so that's certainly something that we can put down as one of those ongoing issues that needs to be explored further.
I think something else that complements our just absolutely genius parking codes is Crystal Beach. We have 9-story or 9-bedroom microtels, which we have a horrible problem with parking over there too. Mm-hmm. Occupancy for 36 people, 4 parking spots. Now that's predicated on 9 people in a car. Are they all driving Suburbans with? Yeah. So I mean, sure, but you know that's just common sense.
Right.
Which apparently we're not operating by. But if we could, hopefully, this is the objective. So we'll get there. And I don't mean to take this all out on you.
No,
We've never
no,
actually met. You seem very good at what you do.
I'm a sounding
happy to have you
Not
here.
to belabor exactly the same point, but we have various classifications for these mini hotels, whether it's a bed and breakfast, a hotel, there's several of them. But a single family unit matches more the definition that was just read, the 5 people, the blood relatives such as this.
Right.
Yet, we'll take a home with 7, 10 bedrooms or whatever, 18 people in a bunk room that we know is going to sleep 36 or more because they state that, and we'll classify that as a single-family home and not a mini hotel or a bed and breakfast or one of the other classifications. I think a hotel is 25 people or more. Well, if it's 25 people or more, don't want to belabor the point. What I'm driving at is if our attitude when approving the plans to begin with was to go to the minimum instead of the maximum, where if it's obviously it's designed, a single family's home designed for 5 or 10 or something, and there's 12 bedrooms, there's a problem. That it ought to slide into one of the other classifications automatically. And I realize there's some big holes in the way the code is written. You can interpret them, but instead of interpreting them more loosely, if they could be interpreted more tightly, many of these things could be solved the way the code's written.
So reevaluating that parking standards chart and maybe finding ways to accommodate some of these uses that aren't really being properly classified.
I would agree with that, and I think allowable uses is a sort of an expansion of what the mayor is saying. I mean, many cases, an allowable use is actually being allowed, such as in the single-family residences, we have multiple instances of commercial activity. So is that a matter of needing to, of an enforcement issue, or is it a need to give the code more teeth so that we may enforce it? I mean, we've got wedding venue homes in single-family residences. We have charter boat operations out of residential homes on the bayou. I mean, we've got to have a greater ability to do what we need to be doing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Would a business license be an answer to what could operate in that residence or that hotel or whatever it is? Because that separates the different kinds of commercial activities that are in there, and it would certainly require it up front. I don't know.
What kind of structure were you were talking about in perhaps the little McMansions we were talking about? I think the structure itself is the problem by its very nature and design and use, and the fact that it has no parking. Even if it was a single-family residential, I mean, they're going to be guaranteed to have probably more than 4 cars if they meet maximum capacity and used all the rooms.
What I'm getting to is the fact that the owner of that property would have to show up in person to purchase that license or something like it. And at that point in time, they would sign an affidavit, or they would sign something saying that they had to provide certain types of things to that property in order to operate it. I don't know, but at least that's something you could take to the judge.
And parking may be the most, I'm sorry.
Perhaps can contribute to that line of question. You have an occupational and business license tax. That's not fundamentally a regulatory process. That is one of the very limited number of general revenue sources that you have in the city. And what we call, and you'll hear commonly often referred to as a business license, is really not that at all. It is a receipt for the payment of a tax. And so you have very little presently that relates to actually business regulations. So you're opening a whole new subject from any of your municipal processes in place, if you take that, so that you understand that distinction.
What does that mean, Mr. Miller?
Well, if you want to open a business in Destin and operate a business every year, you come in and pay a tax, and you get a receipt for the payment of that tax. And commonly, that's referred to as a business license, but it technically is not a business license. It's only a receipt for the payment of a tax. So we do very little in Florida municipalities regarding regulation of businesses. So we don't have corresponding operations such as the Department of Professional Regulation, or in my instance, the Florida Bar, in our municipal functions.
Doesn't that beg the question, though, because any commercial or business activity out of a residence is against our current zoning for single-family residential?
Well, you know,
Let me clarify.
that relates to your land development code enforcement scenarios.
Yeah. Let me just clarify that we do a minimum level of review when a business license is applied for. And so that if there's any question about whether it's for a use that is in the appropriate zoning district, then we're not going to issue the license, not knowingly issue that license for that use. that goes for commercial uses of a type and nature that aren't allowed in a particular commercial district, and it goes for commercial uses that aren't allowed in residential districts. So that does happen. Whether we're supposed to be doing that or not, I can't say, because there's a debate about that. And I know there's a couple of schools of thought on this. One school of thought is it's only a tax. The other school of thought is there's still a little bit of authority to regulate that use under our zoning code. And so we just kind of combine those two as part of one process. And that's really what we do when we do that minimum level of review. So just to clarify that.
Could I add to what Mr. Destin said, as the structure being the basic problem when it's originally approved? It's not just the 4 parking spaces. You put 36 people, or if you use it for a wedding venue and you put 150 or 300 people into a home with 3 bedrooms that was designed for a family, it's not sprinkled. You don't have any of the minimal fire codes, I'm assuming, are met. Any of the commercial fire codes are not required for it because it's a single-family home. Put 150 people on a balcony, and you can see these stories all the time of the balconies caving in. I don't know that single-family homes are designed not only for parking, but for that type of use. Somehow or another, these have got to be better defined and placed into a true commercial category where they have the proper parking and meet the proper fire codes, safety codes, and whatever.
So if you strengthen your parking codes, that in a way takes up more land, which will take care of the density problem, I think, but you're left with the question, we're built out. You know, we're talking about very few parcels here, so what do you do? How do you regulate? What do you do with the ones that are currently here?
I have a comment on the homes. I personally hate to see where we've got these, 10,000 square foot homes popping up next to where people have lived for a long period of time, and used as wedding venues or whatever venues that they've got. But the thing is that even if you tried to figure out 10 parking spaces for that particular home or whatever it may be, it's still not enough. So you can never actually accomplish enough parking for everything that they were going to have at that particular residence at any given time. And I'd have a question too that, is it still considered, even though it's just a rental, a home rental, is that a business? I know what we talked about the other night, and the fact that these weddings are being advertised as wedding destinations, and those should be considered commercial, in my opinion, commercial activities. But, it still can be just as many people there without a wedding, so what do we do with that? And it doesn't have to be, so when we start trying to figure the actual what parking we would say that would be needed for a nine bedroom home, how do you actually calculate that and be able to be somewhat knowledgeable and know full well that that's going to be enough to accommodate them, but it won't be, never will, So what do we do there?
More than 4 spots.
I agree. Okay, all right.
I don't know.
We'll say 5 or 6.
I don't know how many,
yeah.
but I think my argument. I think my argument is you're not going to get a 10,000 square foot home if you're going to require more parking. I mean, you're going to take up more of the footprint. So,
Which they weren't meant to be that big anyway on this
Sure.
lot size.
And I agree with what you're saying, but 10 parking spaces won't be enough either.
no, but it certainly doesn't compound
better
the
than 4, yeah.
parking
You're
issue
right.
as much as 4, which are parking.
All right, so it sounds like we need to look at ways to review these types of buildings that are single family, that they're built for, but then they're being used for something other than 5 unrelated people living together due to impacts, whether it be parking or noise, compatibility living next to these other actual single-family homes of people, permanent residents, is what it sounds like. Okay. We got that. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Ramswell brought it up a little in a sense. If you have properties that are zoned differently, but they're like next door to each other. And one of the things that we looked at in the Harbor District itself was you took like 3 parcels, cobbled them together to get what you want, you know, to get a condo tower or whatever you want there. And let's just say one of those parcels was zoned low density residential, and the other 2 were zoned because of the way the zoning is. The way that we butt up stuff was zoned commercial or something like that, or you know, we have some areas that are considered zone bay estates, and then they're buttoning up to a low density area, and they want to change that, and they kind of, you know, and everything. And we've been told that sometimes it's spot zoning, and that it's not spot zoning. And I think that's one of the issues that needs to come up in the land development codes, and also in the, you know, the comp plan, is what is and what is not spot zoning, because you have certain unique areas in Destin that actually, you know, come together, and could be either way, you know, for economic reasons. They don't want to build a monster house. They want to develop, you know, some small residential housing, or they don't want to build a monster business, or actually they want to build a business, you know, a couple of businesses, and not a big old condominium, but they're restricted because one piece of property is zoned one way and one piece of property is zoned another. So that's one thing that I would see that we need to address.
Scott, could you get us some kind of literature on what spot zoning is? Could you find that for us, please? Because we've had this discussion.
Can I say again how much I hate that term?
Yeah, or what's
will,
legal, what's not.
I will do that. I'm not sure it's going to make a lot of sense, but I choose not to really think of it in terms of spot zoning, and think of it in terms of relationships between adjacent uses. And if the zoning map, you know, you'll have uses transition from a more intense category to a less intense category, bearing a rational relationship between compatibilities as you go between those uses. So if you look at the future land use map, you have intense uses along the harbor, and then as you move north, you transition into less intense uses till finally you get to the Bay Estates land use category, where you've got the least intense land uses and dense land uses in town. And so that logical progression is the opposite of spot zoning, if that helps. Well, that spot zoning is when you just basically force a use that bears no logical or justifiable relationship to the surrounding uses right in the middle as kind of like an enclave, or a spot enclave in the middle of other uses with which it's not compatible. And
well,
I hope that helps.
Scott, one of the problems that I'm seeing, like on the harbor, is if you go east past Chatham's family business, you've got some single-family residences, you've got a couple of condominium complexes, you've got all the way down the line till you get to Sandpiper Cove, then you've got condominiums. And so let's say, and well, we've got several, you know, like I said, so you've got mixed use right there. And if they went and decided that Marabella, I think it's what it, yeah, okay, wanted to go backwards, go west a little bit, and bought some of those single-family residential homes, but they're not zoned that way because they were previously here before the city was, you know, before we zoned it.
Well, that would be a logical, but I think a planner would tell you that would be a logical progression of the more intense or dense use into an adjacent area that's already in residential use. It's not of an entirely different category altogether, because it does provide for
But even though it's a condominium, it would still be a commercial entity at the same time.
You have, you know, the reason why I don't like to use the term spot zoning is because you have a tremendous degree of variability among land uses all across this state. And in particular, if you go into any small town in North Florida, you will see a residential area with a factory sitting right next to it, you know? And I mean, it is so variable that it's a concept. The spot zoning as a concept really isn't a good concept. And I think the better way to look at it is, in your zoning decision making, you're trying to protect the compatibility of those uses such that both of those uses can coexist over time and be successful. And so that's really that, making that transition and making sure those uses don't come into conflict over time, so as to threaten the success of and the successful use and enjoyment of the owners of those parcels. That's what you're trying to avoid.
I think I have one last thing, and then I guess we'll go on break perhaps, unless anybody has any other stuff. But we had a fairly contentious meeting with regards, so we've got a bit of an issue here in Destin where the way to sort of still make money in the development game is to take what were otherwise previously fairly large lots inside the residential areas of the village part of Destin and then subdivide them down into smaller parts, which is okay, but if it's unchecked for a long amount of time, we're going to have really severe infrastructure issues because each time it comes to the council, we're only seeing it as, well, it's just this one lot, or it's just this, and it's hard to conceptualize and aggregate the impact, but it will be significant because we don't have virgin land to strip out and put a nice big house on, not to mention it's hard to sell those now in the present economy. So the pressure is to rezone these larger lots and subdivide them to make money, but we're not really doing a good job of, one, applying the rules. Well, I take that back. We're just not doing a good job of really measuring how that impact is going to affect us on an infrastructure standpoint. And you know, I think a lot of people don't understand that Bay Estates is future land use designated as low-density residential. So as it stands right now, they can apply for it. We can tell them no, but you know, the question might be, do we really want Bay Estates designated as low-density residential? I know a lot of folks in Bay Estates that were not quite happy with the idea of constantly having the lots subdivided. You know, each one of those comes with at least another 2 cars, and it's something we need to look at, and if there's a way we can track it, keep a hold of it, and if it's the will of the council, then maybe take a good long look. If we're going to try to preserve the heritage, you know, that's how it happens, that your whole community can change over the span of 10 years, and it's a death by 1,000 cuts, and it happens through one tiny little, oh, well, we're only doing it with this one lot. Oh, well, there's another guy, we're doing it with this one lot, and over time, you've got infrastructure problems from the amount of people you've brought in, and you've changed the complete character of these areas.
That was the whole gist of what I did the other night.
I'm glad you brought that up because it was interesting. When I was going through all this, I noticed in the zoning and where it describes Bay Estates, it actually specifically says land designated Bay Estates shall not include development or redevelopment of short-term residential or non-residential uses, which I thought was really interesting. I wasn't aware of that when we had our discussion on Monday.
So being able to track the cumulative impacts over time of subdividing the property, and how we're going to control that over time. Okay. Does anyone have anything else they'd want to?
Because of the limited land, because of the infill lots that are available throughout the city, you're going to see a lot of situations where those vacant lots are attractive now for building mostly single-family residential. And so a lot of that's going on now. I'm not sure, this was probably the first instance I can remember in a very long time that anybody wanted to subdivide a lot. I don't remember any other circumstances like that in many years.
What about at the corner of Seibert and Kelly?
That was a subdivision, yes.
Right, that was last year.
That was, what's his name, Bill?
We went from 1 house to 5.
But they were already platted. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. All right. We can leave it here for right now, take a break if we've kind of come to a little bit of a closure here. We will have the opportunity after public comment to come back and kind of finalize some of these thoughts that we're having and kind of get some next steps and some direction of where we need to start moving forward with potential amendments or additional research that staff needs to look into. Okay.
A mention to those folks who maybe came in after the meeting had started. Public comment, in order to come to the podium and speak for your 3 minutes, we do need you to fill out a blue comment card, and give it to Ray, our city clerk over there. He raised his hand. The comment cards will be used to invite folks up to the microphone in the order that we receive them. And if you have a question, we ask that you please write that on the back of the card, and you can bring that to me, and I will make sure that staff responds to your question in a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay, this keeps us right on schedule. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. So I just wanted to say before we get started here again, we did find a set of car keys in the women's restroom, and Ray has them at the clerk station. So ladies, check your purses. Yeah, somebody. Yep. That was in the women's restroom. Ray has those if they belong to you. Okay. No, Ray did not find those. Yes, Ray was not the one who found those in the women's restroom. That was me. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think that was important. Thank you, Ray. Okay, so here we are. We are back. We are now approaching the public comments portion of tonight. City Manager, Ms. Carice Lejeune, will facilitate this portion, but before we turn it over to her, I just want to go over those quick instructions and quick reminders. If you filled out a comment card, you will be called. You won't be able to come up unless you have filled out a comment card and are called. When you are called to the podium, please state your name and address before making your comment. Also, as we said before, please limit your comments to just that, comments. Council and staff will not be taking or answering questions tonight, but Ms. Lejeune will be taking comment cards that have written questions on the back and make sure that city staff addresses those in a timely manner. Also, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. This is a variance from the normal city council 5 minutes because we have a long evening and we want to make sure that we keep those comments to 3 minutes, and you will see that there is a timer, so you'll be able to see how much time you have left, and we'll alert you when your 3 minutes are done. At that, I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Lejeune, and we will start calling for public comment.
Ma'am, I have a question. You said that some of the cards will have just questions on them that will be presented to the city manager. Will those be read into the record so that we can all just hear what they are, so it's not repeated and we're just aware of it?
The questions will be submitted on the back of the card, which then I will take and make sure that every individual card gets a personal response, whether it's for their phone number or email, and make sure that their question is fully answered by staff. So we'll start doing that tomorrow.
Is there a way we can see the questions?
You're saying you want council to have a copy of those questions?
Oh,
Is that
absolutely.
possible?
I
Okay.
can make you a copy, and I'll make sure that a copy of that goes in everybody's box.
Okay, good. Thank you. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, so, and excuse me if I don't pronounce your name correctly, Mr. Josh Riker?
I'm Josh Riker. I live at 907 Peacock Point Drive. Listened to a couple of the comments tonight. It seems like the council wants some more control over what's going on in the city. I can understand, where you're coming from. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe the process when any application comes before you or any type of development order. The public gets to come up and speak, and anybody can talk, including the applicant, and that's understandable. Where I think there may be a flaw, and I would hope that it can be looked at in the future for future applicants or anybody who's looking to do anything, is that after public comment is closed, I feel that it can be unfair that the council gets the opportunity to speak and say whatever they want, whether that be true statements and something helpful or something that might be false or not true about the people that are talking. And as an applicant, we have to stand there or sit there and listen. So in the future, if it could, and I don't know how that process would be changed or anything like that, but I just feel that the public, I know you want to hurry the meeting up, so you don't want the public to constantly come up and talk, but I do think it's fair for, if a council is going to speak, they may say something that they believe is true, but it's not. And, people in the audience may know that it's not true. They should have a right to defend themselves. Otherwise, we sit there, you vote, and we go home. And, we could be happy, we could be upset. And so just, looking forward to it, I think it's a valid argument to give the city of Destin the opportunity to defend themselves, if that need be. So that's all I got for tonight.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. And Diana Lynn?
Diana Lynn Monson, 97 Sunflower Court. Mayor and Council, 6 months previously, I shared with Council important knowledge on the land lying east of the pass that seemed to have disappeared from your records. A federal official followed in a city presentation that under an act of Congress dated October 27, 1965, perpetual use and control was assigned to the U.S. Army Corporation of Engineers. 100% of all the land designated were state-owned parcels C and B of Destin. No future building would ever be allowed over any of the three. I bring this up to you again and to our new manager and new council, as the city has of yet, to my knowledge, corrected the zone recorded over these parcels. This Congress Act provides our protection, and it's under the federal easement 101E6 that Destin is still alive and thriving today. I would be happy to discuss this anytime with any one of you. But our city maps once showed conservation zoning over states C and B, reflecting this protection even to the city map of 2000 Flume. Yet zone on B and C were removed by staff, and for years it followed as a blank parcel. Next, the zone appeared as high-dense residential, while the Okaloosa County tax records clearly show it as single-family residence. And also Destin Point, where that parcel lies, and it belongs in the parcel, is single-family residence. Even today, not one past or present council member can find when, where, or why the land zone map became blank, nor did council find one single reference to a parcel number or a name in any ordinance or amendment relating to that zone. Council referenced confusion, as at the time, the city was actually addressing another miszoned area over state conservation land in Crystal Beach. The state and owners joined against the city in a lawsuit, and the settlement ordered that the miszoned state of public conservation land be corrected. It could have been here that public and private wording interchanged, but not once but twice the staff miszoned conservation land, creating multiple lawsuits, incorrect appraisals, and foreclosures.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Lynn. I appreciate that.
Can you ask for more? I just have a couple more things to say.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Very important.
We have a lot of your neighbors who would like to speak as well, so if you don't mind.
Miss, is there a way we can get a copy of what you got?
I will write it out and send it to you.
If you would like to give it to our city clerk, he'll make sure that all the council members get a copy.
I just have 2 more sentences to make.
Please let her finish.
All right, your future land use element reads where the land must be used and be according to that. And now you're going to send in to the state a 2020 comp plan that clearly shows a flume map with a zone that can't be used that way. And I ask you to look at that closely, decide if that is right for your city to do, and go forward with that. And I want to thank you for your time, for hearing the people, and giving us the opportunity from the public to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. Gail Sherrill?
Gail Sherrill, 200 Gulf Shore Drive. I've lived in Destin now for 4 years. I've attended many of your city council meetings. I've attended many of your workshops. I've attended also the meetings with the Envision Destin. I'd like to share with you just a few of my experiences as a relatively new member of Destin. I've talked and met many very intelligent people and that live here in Destin. And it saddens me when I hear many of them say comments like, I've lived in Destin for 35 years, but the hassle of living here is no longer worth it. This city just seems to care about money, doesn't seem to care about its citizens. Citizens are sometimes feel like they're told one thing and then the opposite is done. They're asked for input, but they're not heard. But I'd like to preface that statement by saying I do feel from comments that were made tonight that the new council has heard the citizens, and I really appreciate that. Also, citizens feel like that many times they are given one plan, but then that plan's not carried through. Or maybe, one thing I'd like to show you is this might be an example of that. This is what the Destin Harbor, the citizens were told this is what the Destin Harbor would look like. This is what the Destin Harbor looks like. This is why some of the citizens complain. Also, Destin needs these outstanding citizens. We don't need them moving away from our city, but also the citizens need you. You made a choice to run, even if you're not getting paid. You had a reason for wanting to run and to sit up here before us. And I hope that's because you really, really care about what happens to Destin, and I think as a whole it is. But you are our governing body, and we do depend on you. We want you to develop a comprehensive plan and control a comprehensive plan where you will not have the problems that some of you have already experienced. For example, things taking place or being passed that you didn't even know about, or maybe changes being made where permits were not even given, or maybe where development orders were given that increase many of our existing problems, like our traffic or the lack of our beach enjoyment for both citizens as well as our guests. This won't happen again if you develop a well-designed, comprehensive plan that you are in control of. Responsible development is important for a city. We can't live without it. But irresponsible development will destroy a city. If our infrastructure cannot keep up with what we are doing, then everyone is going to be unhappy. The content of a comprehensive plan will decide which path Destin is going to follow. Thank you for having this workshop. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for all your good comments tonight. And please develop a plan that will correct the problems that we've had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Sherrill.
City manager, was the photographs that she provided, could the camera catch that from the angle? And is that something that maybe she should hold up for the cameras?
Oh, could you please give those to the city clerk, ma'am? And he'll make sure that everyone gets a chance to see them.
Here, you want me to hold up one and you hold up the other? Just so, I don't know that everybody got to see them. Show and tell. Okay.
Okay. Ms. Barbara Combs or Barbara Combs?
can't read with my glasses. This is on. My name is Barbara Comas. I live at 480 Gulf Shore Drive. I'm a relatively new resident. My husband and I purchased our condo unit in 2007 as a vacation home and a rental property. We are both retired now and plan on becoming full-time voting residents of Destin. Before we bought our property, I had previously talked with the appropriate office with the Army Corps of Engineers before I purchased our home. And I was under the understanding that the Army Corps of Engineers had and still has a perpetual easement on parcels B and C. We invested in this neighborhood with the certainty that we would always have a view of the dunes and the pass, and that the sand dike from the jetties over B and C would protect our investment. Through the years, there were rumors and ownership changed. I would contact the Army Corps of Engineers site office in Panama City and verify that no changes had been made on their part. They always said that they had no plans to give up their easement because they needed it for dredging, and once released, they could never get it back. We feel the easement is important to Holiday Isle's stability and safety. Without doubt, the easement is important to dredging of the pass and therefore of the utmost importance to the future of the harbor and to Destin. I have been guaranteed by the Corps that parcel B and C will always remain undeveloped and under that perpetual easement. According to the zoning language for the city of Destin, we agree that zones should reflect what can be done with that land. In this case, nothing can be done with this land. It should be converted back to a conservation zone because it was changed to HDR with no thought process about this piece of land. It was, as Diana said, grouped together with a lawsuit negotiation. It doesn't make any sense why it's zoned HDR when it can never be developed. And I'm asking, because I'm running out of time, that the land be thoughtfully analyzed and not included in this blanket change. It should be zoned as conservation or something appropriate for what it can be used for. I would also ask that if this comes up for a vote or anything like that, that anyone who is a council person that has anything to do with B or C abstain from voting on the zone change so that it's a fair vote. And I also would like to mention that I understand that there is not a submerged land lease with the state to land a boat or ferry on the East Pass with riparian rights over to Parcel B. I assume that has not happened, and if that is true, why are they still being allowed to operate? And I would like to see the city address this issue with the state, if you can. And I appreciate all the council and any support and help that you can give us to maintain that piece of land. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Leslie Mims-Sherrick?
Hello, my name is Leslie Mims-Sherrick and I reside at 300 Gulf Shore Drive. My family purchased our condo in the summer of 2000. That's been 16 years ago, so we've seen many changes in Destin. When purchasing, we did that knowing that the Army Corps of Engineers had an easement over the state properties of B and C and what was conservation. We purchased property being reassured of that. When it changed somehow without public notice to the high-density residential, and since then, every developer who's fought to build on it has created multiple lawsuits, fraud, and then foreclosures. As an owner whose home value depends on the abutting beach and that it was in mind when purchasing, I requested in a petition last year that it be returned to conservation land. Last I heard, a Corps of Engineers representative spoke, and you heard this story straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and council was questioned and was assured that no previous council had changed the zoning without knowledge of doing so. If anyone on the staff of the Destin changed it wrongly, we are asking that this council to correct it and change it back to conservation. If you don't, it will affect hundreds of owners on Holiday Isle, if not thousands. Thank you for your time and consideration for the future of Holiday Isle and Destin.
Thank you very much for your comments, ma'am. Steve Menschel.
Steve Menschel, 65 Siesta Bluff, Destin, Mayor, Council, special welcome, our City Manager. Thanks to all of you for putting together the comp plan workshop. For some of you, this is your first bite of the apple, and we, the citizens of Destin, thank you in advance for doing your due diligence and listening to us as we opine on a variety of issues regarding the 2020 comp plan. Some of you who previously said you had to vote on the comp plan because you have the votes to pass it now before the election, this is your second chance to listen to the people who you represent and take the opportunity to make the necessary changes that serve the best interest of all the residents of Destin. In a council meeting this past Monday, it was stunning to sit in the audience and hear how many times issues discussed resulted in council members stating it is something that needs to be discussed in the comp plan workshop. This is a clear indication that the previous Delphi technique approved comp plan needs attention, and ladies and gentlemen, that is what we're here to do. For those not familiar with the Delphi technique, it is defined as a plan to control a meeting to achieve the outcome that the facilitator and plan stakeholders want. Parking, I would respectfully request you consider the following as you work towards a revised comp plan. Parking problems have been discussed, and I know it is a work in progress, but immediate steps need to be put in place to ensure compliance with existing ordinance and laws. Status updates should be provided at each council meeting. Increases in some cases, uncontrolled growth has placed an overburden on our current infrastructure, as example, our roads and sewage and the like. A sense of balance is critical and needs to be factored into any revision updates to the comp plan. The council should consider a temporary short-term moratorium until comp plan changes revisions are made. The comp plan needs to reestablish the council's oversight, which was removed. The comp plan needs to incorporate the will of the people as evidenced in workshops and public meetings with less intensity, less density, less height, and special attention needs to be put on future redevelopment. It's critical. Information from various sources indicates in some cases that city processes are not user-friendly and take too long, which results in persons and businesses proceeding without the required permits and permissions. It's basically do what you want until you get caught and then do the paperwork. Steps have to be put in place to resolve these issues immediately. As you're all aware, at this council meeting on Monday night, you heard numerous stories about staff in some cases not giving the same answer to a question when asked by different residents, in some cases having their hands tied and unable to do their job that they are paid to do. This body needs to be aware improprieties cannot all be placed on a previous community development director or city manager. Some may fall on current staff. With that said, I suggest the council schedule a workshop, the purpose of which is to have an open mic for the citizens of Destin to stand before you and discuss issues and problems. The agenda of the workshop is only for each of you to sit and listen to the citizens and then have the opportunity to discuss the information and to offer ideas on how to best serve the issues and problems. The difference between this suggested workshop and this workshop tonight is the fact that tonight's workshop is on Comp B issues, and the proposed workshop allows an open night for citizens to come before each of you and staff and provide information, ask questions of concern to them. By doing this, it will allow each of you to have a better understanding of the issues, concerns our citizens are experiencing, and thus allow us all to work together to find solutions to move our city forward. And finally, I want to thank each of you for all of your hard work. The suggestions, concerns, complaints you hear tonight regarding the 2020 comp plan clearly demonstrate that changes and revisions need to be made with the citizens' input in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir. We do need to kind of go through these, so please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if possible. I really appreciate your helping us get through this. Mr. Dewey Destin, please.
Dewey Destin, 777 Spring Lake Drive. I appreciate the situation you're in. I spent 6 terms up there sitting with you, although I can tell I've gotten older since there are only 2 of you still up there that I served with. I urge you to reinsert yourself into the process. We incorporated this town 32 years ago because we were greatly in desire of having elected officials that we voted on make decisions that had to do with development. With the changes in this 2020 comp plan, we've gone right back to where we were 32 years ago, where we have those decisions being made by folks that we don't vote for and we can't elect, and that actually you don't hire or fire. The multimodal system has been a disaster, mainly because of its effect on the parking. The mistake we made was we changed the parking regulations before we built the garages. We went from minimum parking required to maximum parking allowed and reduced it by about 40%. And therein lies the reason we're having parking problems. There is a fix for it, though, is we still need to build the garages. We can finance them by going back to the minimum allowed and allow people who want to do something with their property to pay for a certain number. Percentage will be decided by you all in the public parking garage. That's the only way we're going to get them paid for. And we either have to get the things built or go back to a different parking scheme, or we will continue to be in the kind of shape we're in right now. So I urge you to go back to reinserting yourself. When we started out, I think we used a 10,000 square feet where we reviewed, we were in the process over that. Then we went to 20,000, we kept bumping it up. We don't expect you to review the small things. Mr. Marler is right. You would be here 7 days a week, all day long. But we do expect you to review the things that change the very nature and quality of the life in Destin. We want you to be in that process. The details need to be worked out a little better. Some of the details in the comp plan right now are not what we really need for review. But it's real simple. You guys reinsert yourself instead of staff folks that we don't vote for. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Lee Moore?
Lee Moore, representing Howard Group, 585 Grand Boulevard, Miramar Beach. The information that follows is a critique. We hired a planning firm, a substantial planning firm out of Colorado to review the plan, the current plan as it stands today. And these are their thoughts with some minor input from us, of course. We didn't have time to do a professional, thorough review the last time this went through. And so we were thrilled about the changes of eliminating Tier 3 because height was a big issue. But we feel that in eliminating Tier 3 partially addressed that, but we feel that other things crept in or were added or changed that are issues. First, the lack of a vision element in the plan. There's no vision at the beginning of the plan to say what the people, the community wants the brand and look of Destin to be. And so we think that should be added. We've gone through plenty of public process to determine what that is, and that all of the elements of the comp plan and land development code should reflect that vision. The building heights, even though the tier system was removed, the maximum heights for key districts now reflect heights that exceed the old Tier 2 standards. The result appears to be a win-win for developers who can now develop a more intense development without having to develop or implement design principles. Floor area ratio and density issues, there's no description of basis for establishing the FARs that were established. Why a 3.0 in one district and 2.0 in another? What was the justification? These are hypothetical questions, not questions that I expect you to answer. What was the justification for doubling the intensity of development in South Harbor and North Harbor mixed use, as well as significant increases in other districts and zones? And yes, we understand the tier system was removed, but the intensity allowed doubled and even more in some cases. The design criteria were deferred to the land development code. And until those are accomplished, the current land development code and comp plan are in conflict. That's been discussed. We have some concerns about those conflicts and what that leaves us potentially open for, may leave us open to. Then the design criteria take time to draft. So in the comp plan, it says that a lot of things are supposed to be done within 1 year, with the land development code being brought into consistency with the comp plan. We think the capacity for that to be accomplished in 1 year really needs to be assessed and thought about carefully. Maximum roof height and styles need to be addressed, and guidelines need to be developed for that. Roofing is so important, or the roof pitch and the look. And then long-term planning, there's a maximum that no amount of parking spaces, garages, alternative modes of transportation can offset amount of development. So the last thing I'll say, and I'm moving through this very quickly, is that the bonus for having what it was called high-quality development that's oriented to Harbor Boulevard, why would we have that as an incentivized bonus versus a requirement if we feel like that's high quality and what we need here? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore, for your comments. Mr. Steve Bennett?
Good evening. Just a fact check on two things. Going back to the compatibility review, the Emerald Grand, as it's sitting today, such a hot topic in the city, was approved under compatibility review. It is not a Tier 2 building. A council sat, listened to expert witnesses, and a QJ kept themselves from public comment by ex parte rules and uncontested. Besides Marina Point West, 7 stories. Your planning commission told you not compatible. A council decided it's compatible. Home Depot, incompatible based on sloppy language and floor area ratio. What happened? You ended up with a large big box strip. Home Depot moved to the county. Windward Marine, big boat storage that was planned at one time, beat on compatibility and harbor safety. It fragmented the huge lot that is the source of much of the city's angst right now. Had it been a successful working harbor building, it probably would have stayed that way, and the land would not have been assembled into what everybody's so upset about. So this compatibility analysis, I've been through it. I've studied the comp plan. I've been through 6 QJs. Took a year with staff. Staff's reluctant to tell you anything that might be compatible because they know a council is going to review it. They're hired. They serve at your pleasure, basically. And after a year and $150,000 worth of investment in all the plans to have the right to come to a QJ, a developer, any developer or landowner, is kind of got a attitude that he's going to pursue it as far as it takes. And there just have not been a lot of successes. Now you're talking about entertaining compatibility review again when a bunch of citizens accept it and stakeholders accept it Tier 2 as clearly stated objective criteria for design. You build this box in this shape at this position, you give extra open space, you're deemed compatible. Tier 3, had we kept it, would have been argumentative for the council to determine A, if it's compatible, and B, if there's enough public benefits to justify it. So you've established 6 or 7 years of a clearly stated objective criteria compatibility system. You're planning on possibly going off into another subjective review, applause meter, listening to social media comments, listening to public, when you should be defending the clearly stated boundaries within which each type of development can be done. If it's a 10-story is the max at a certain setback, you should defend that just like you defended Bay Estates the other day. You should defend each parcel based on future land use maps, clearly stated boundaries, past council's decisions. I don't think, not to be threatening, but I just don't think in a court of law it's going to stand up in a writ of certiorari or whatever comes, Burt Harris or anything following a negative decision. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Bennett. Mary Ann Wines?
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for your time. My name is Mary Ann Wines, and I represent the Destin Fishing Fleet, which owns over 3 acres on the Destin Harbor. We have 40 boats, 37 of which more vessels for hire, the very lifeblood on which Destin was founded. When we purchased the property, our goal was to protect the charter fleet from being run out of Destin. Not only have we done that, but we are the biggest marina in Destin owned by the fishermen who are protecting the heritage of Destin, their heritage. It was never the fleet's intention to develop anything more than a place to house the fuel co-op and as many charter boats as we could save. But when we were offered a large sum by a local developer who wanted to redevelop the property but required that the charter boats be moved out to make way for private boats, we opted to keep our property, protect the fishermen, and make up the loss by doing our own development around the fishing fleet rather than at their demise. The last change to the comp plan took away over 25% of the buildable space allowed. As an example, if you purchased a lot to build a 2,000 square foot home, but the code changed and you were only allowed to build a 15 square foot home, you'd be disappointed and probably really, really angry, and that would be horrific to you. But when you're in business and someone takes away 25% of your potential to make income, that's pretty much your entire profit. Why would you bother? I've run the numbers, and it's not pretty. I appreciate that some people want no development at all in Destin. That's unreasonable. You could say there are too many restaurants or too many grocery stores. We've heard all that too. To disallow these things is wrong. The bottom line is that people who put themselves out there and purchase property and plan to develop, whether it's a small home, marina, or shopping center, expect that their city to not take away these rights from them as long as they build within the correct zoning district. I'm sure that most of you have good intentions. It would be beneficial for all of you to have a better grasp of the comp plan, so I'm glad that y'all are going through this. The Destin Fishing Fleet supported the Canaan plan. We didn't support it because it helped us, quite the contrary. We lost a whopping 25% of buildable space. We supported it not only because we felt it was the right thing to do, but also because it was prepared by experts in the field of urban planning and not shaped by local politics. Professional planners who were trained to balance property rights with typical not-in-my-backyard naysayers who will always protest things. I'm here, I've got mine, stop everything else. Every city hears it all the time. It's common, so don't let that worry you too much. I'm reminded of the Mid-Bay Bridge when it was proposed, being called the Bridge to Nowhere. I can only wish that those same people were never allowed to use it. It happens everywhere. People complain, but once it arrives, they're all over it. You can't base your decisions on the people who've not made the public contributions to our city. I'm talking about investment of time, money, and personal service. If their only contribution is negativity and anti-growth, it's not a contribution. I would respectfully encourage you to not take away additional land use privileges, including clear-cut parameters without council interference from existing landowners from whom have already lost much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wines. Sandra Williams.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Williams, Gulf Shore Drive. I'm here tonight to say some things about safety issues. If you look at the top of our agenda this evening, it says Common Core of the Month, Commitment to Public Safety. And I looked up a few statistics about 98, our famous Bloody 98. According to the Florida Department of Transportation, a study conducted in 2015, the area between Marlar Bridge to Indian Trail, 3.5 miles, facilitates 40,000 vehicles per day. A study from 2007 to 13 shows that Destin recorded 617 vehicle accidents, with 18% of those involving pedestrians. Since 2015, records show that 24 pedestrians and bicyclists have been hit by vehicles on our 98 stretch here through Destin. On June 6, 2016, an article published in our daily news regarding the recent marathon, our own Sheriff Ashley commented that Highway 98 is over capacity now, not in a year, not in 5 years, but today. So I'm asking that we all consider a no-build moratorium today until we can do a study on the infrastructure, figure out how to accommodate all the additional people and vehicles that this new development will bring to our area. And also, we should look at our sewer plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Williams. Guy Tadlock?
Guy Tadlock, 502 Noriego. Honorable Mayor and councilors, I appreciate the opportunity tonight. The 2020 comp plan addresses most of our concerns over building heights. However, many people still have concerns about the very liberal FAR that's now provided, especially in the South Harbor and the North Harbor mixed-use areas. These areas are the most intense area of the city. It's the greatest choke point in our traffic, and it's the biggest problem with parking. Yet the plan allows a bonus of 0.5 FAR in this area. Please reconsider that. In fact, I feel strongly that there should not be any incentives to allow for greater FAR. And I'd also like to comment on one other issue, and that's multimodal. And I don't want to reiterate the comments by Councilor Foreman and Councilor Destin, but I really have a concern about multimodal. And as you well know, in the past 5 years, we've not reached the success that we would like to see in multimodal. And even though the city has hired an outside contractor with a lot of experience, I'm still not very optimistic that we're going to have a lot of success for multimodal, and it's going to reduce the traffic on Highway 98. And my reason is very simple, is at the Canaan meetings, we learn that out of every 100 people that you meet in Destin, that only 18 are local. Now, by deduction, and I don't think I miss it too far, if you go out and count 100 cars out here on 98, that 82 of those will be non-locals and or tourists. They don't bring bicycles, they don't walk, they don't want to park from their cars. So please be very considerate of that. I think it'd be best to err on the safe side on our comp plan. And then one other thing, let me mention that I feel like that the only solution for reducing traffic in Destin is to add bridge lanes. And we need bridge lanes to the north and bridge lanes to the west. And yet none of these are on the radar, and I'm told that it takes 10 to 15 years from a bridge from concept to completion. I firmly believe that the comprehensive plan, as we refine it, needs to err on the safe side, and that we have some relief in traffic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Tadlock. Scott Munson?
Scott Monson, 97 Sunflower Court. Thank you, council members and mayor. We appreciate your time in the workshop today. Most of my points have already been covered, so I'll move through them quickly. One thing is just to make sure in the final comprehensive plan that all the parking structures above grades are counted in the intensity and density. Secondly, I heard loud and clear we all can agree our infrastructure is broken. So I'm asking the council to consider a moratorium on high density development until we have a plan to address that. And additionally, I would ask that you would not extend any development orders until that problem is addressed. Lastly, I'd ask you to review and revise your delegation of authority to limit the decision-making of the staff, which has been brought up today, and to provide greater oversight of that decision-making on the staff. And then lastly, you must also enforce the codes you have today, or all the work done in the comp plan aren't going to make any difference. Thanks again. We appreciate your effort to preserving our heritage for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Munson. Gary Troop?
Mr. Mayor and City Council, my name is Gary Troop. I live at 86 Shira Street. I appreciate your comments and concerns regarding the 9-bedroom homes that Sleep 36. They create great disruption in our neighborhood in Crystal Beach. It is true that Destin is built out, but as Councilman Foreman pointed out, it is ripe for redevelopment. The 3 6,000 square foot houses that had 9 bedrooms, Sleep 36, with only 4 parking spaces each, are redevelopments. Really nice little homes were torn down there. If the council does not put code in place today to control this, your children will be up in these chairs saying this should have been fixed 20 years ago. I live in Manhattan Beach, California part-time, and I see similarities. Manhattan Beach was completely built out in 1980 when I moved there, and today there are very few homes left from that era. It's pretty sad. In regards to Destin, consider that tearing down my 10-year-old 3,000-foot square house on Shira Street and building a 9-bedroom wedding venue probably makes financial sense. More people are going to replicate that business model unless it's stopped. Let me say I'm not against development. I'm not anti-development, but just because some landowners have gotten away with irresponsible development doesn't mean we owe it to or are being unfair to those who have yet to be irresponsible. When acquiring a piece of property, there are no guarantees about the future. At some point, the City Council must protect the City of Destin by putting common sense code in place for development and redevelopment that will strategically set the stage for the city. I don't feel the City Council has the bandwidth to review large numbers of developments, nor the legal authority to block developments that meet code. We need new and more restrictive development codes. In regards to the mini hotels, I'm not sure how to stop them, but I do respectfully request that you stop the approval of splitting lots until you figure that out. Some ideas: classify any property advertised as sleeping more than 15 to 20 people, be treated as commercial hotels and regulated as such. Bed tax, fire inspections, special permits that can be revoked if rules are not followed. For future developments, require 1 parking space for each bedroom. Existing properties should be heavily sanctioned and fined for excessive illegal parking and noise violations. It needs to be large enough to make an impact. Rental agreements could specify maximum number of vehicles allowed to be parked on site. I'm sure there's a lot of other things, but those are my ideas. Thank you for your time and putting on the workshop.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Troop. That concludes the public comment portion of our meeting, and I'd like to thank you all very much for your cooperation and for your intelligent, well-spoken comments. Planning Council, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lejeune. Caitlin, yes?
Miss, I think there's 2 more in the audience that would like to speak.
Can we accommodate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but only 2 more. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
Hey, I'm Carrie Harbaugher, 413 Spring Lane. This is a workshop, and I want to throw something out there. I'm not going to make any complaints, and I know that everybody here on this council is going to do what's right for 12,000 people and not 20, but I have an idea. I want to throw this out so that y'all can work this in the workshop. I have a government contract. I sell ice cream. I'm exclusive on Eglin and Hurlburt. The fella prior to me was talking about the beach accesses in Crystal Beach. People that live in Destin proper have no beach access. We own none, and we will not fight the traffic to go to Crystal Beach. So I understand that part of the overdevelopment. We have nowhere to go. Is there anybody on this council or within our staff that could possibly negotiate with the Air Force for the NCO parking? There's 150-something parking places. I mean, I'm entitled to them because I'm military. Anything can be negotiated with them. I negotiate with them. I've had a contract for 15 years with the Air Force. It's just food for thought. If this is a workshop, we're supposed to throw ideas. I don't understand. The reason I don't do the NCO is because they offer concessions. Nobody ever fulfills those concessions because there's not enough turnover. There's not enough military people that strictly visit that 150, 60, 70 parking spaces. Why can't we send a representative from the city and see if we can't negotiate a deal for the parking for beach access for Destin proper? I'm just food for thought. It can work. It can happen. We just need that right person that can speak to the base commander or somebody representing. Food for thought. Let's get it. Let's tell them that we'll lease it, we'll take care of it, and they can have the concessions. Anything. Just food for thought. It's sitting there.
Thank you for your comments. And I believe there was one more. Okay.
Retha Shreve, 415 Gulf Shore Drive. I've spoke about this before, but it deserves to be spoken about again. Some people have mentioned Parcel B and the things that go on there, getting it switched back over to conservation, which is the utmost priority to me. But the second priority is the problems that are out there. You know, time and again, the city has been asked about the Emerald Grand Shuttle landing on Parcel B, and whose responsibility or whose jurisdiction it falls under. As Google Maps has shown us from 2012 to present, it shows that there's a significant size hole, 10 to 12 feet deep and very large in radius or in diameter. The question about who is responsible should someone get injured or drown out there, whose jurisdiction it falls under should never have to be debated. I would truly hate to be that someone, I would truly hate that someone would have to die before anyone finds out, per the DEP, that the city of Destin does indeed have jurisdiction over Parcel B. The dangers of the hole that has developed there